You're listening to Hayes Radio Network, Cannabis Lifestyle Radio.
Let's go.
All right, we're back with another episode of Behind the Leaf with your host Alec and your co-host Cassie.
What's up, guys?
And we're here with an amazing dude. He's from Cali Love. He's one of the sales representatives, right?
Yeah,
and,
Cali Love and SF Canna as well.
Yeah. Why don't you go introduce yourself to everybody and
tell us a little bit about what you're doing right now.
Yeah, so my name is Jacob. Originally from Massachusetts, been out in LA about a year now. I'm a master networker, about as connected as anyone else in the SoCal area. Mm-hmm. And I work for California Love. I handle SoCal sales for them, manage about 30 accounts, and then constantly adding new accounts. We actually launch in Dr. Green Thumb's LAX tonight. So if you want to check out California Love while you're getting off the plane, stop off Dr. Green Thumb's LAX. We'll have that tonight, probably by 8 o'clock. And then I also work for SF Canna. I handle SoCal sales for them. We're a premium indoor exotic flower brand. We've been cultivating cannabis for over 20 years in San Francisco.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and just like my boss, Freddie, actually was on First Smoke of the Day about episode 54, and we're just constantly out here. And I would say SF Canna is probably the best smoking, best tasting, cleanest flower you will find in any market. And California Love is a great budget brand that fits. We have a cruiser pack that's 14 1-gram pre-rolls in a jar.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to bring this up that you brought these amazing looking pre-rolls.
You won the Hay Secret Cup for those. For
these, right?
Not for the pre-rolls, but for Biscotti, actually. It was the hybrid strain that we launched. We have about a rotational menu of about 7 different strains. We no longer even have Biscotti because it's sold out.
Wow.
But we have, I want to say like 16 different product SKUs.
Wow.
We're going to be, adding edibles as well as infused beverages soon. And they're really tapped in terms of, like, it's a great team, small team, but one that responds to feedback that buyers and consumers have on a regular basis and are always trying to figure out ways that we can innovate and deliver a product that everyone can afford and everyone can agree is a great product and one that consistently hits levels that you want to hit. So.
Yeah, we were talking about that with consistency and also finding quality products at a good value. And where can you find those? Like dispensaries, I know you were mentioning to us a little while ago.
California Love, like I said, we're launching in Dr. Green Thumb's LAX later tonight. We will be again in Atrium Woodland Hills, which is like right around the corner from here.
Yeah, we were just there the other day on Saturday. They were doing this huge event with vendors.
I was
there.
that
first time?
Oh,
really?
Yeah.
That's funny.
We walked in right when they started, and we had no idea what was going on. We were just like, all right, let's hit the dispensary before we go to the studio. And I was like, wow, this is going on. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, they do a great job. Ty's the buyer and GM over there. He's an awesome guy. And they do, once a month, they do a farmer's market where they have incredible deals. I think like they had Kalia concentrates were 50% off, which is pretty ridiculous because Kalia is one of the premium concentrate brands out there. As well as when you bought like a certain amount, I think if you hit like above $50, then you got kind of like a group prize pack, which was products from all the different brands that they sell. As well as there were tacos outside, there was live music.
There was food,
brands
outside.
That baller bag that they were doing.
The baller bag they were giving away.
God.
Like, we spent enough we fortunately spent enough to be able to qualify to get that, and it was just so much product. We had like a bunch of it laid on the table before for another episode. They really hook you up with that. That was fucking amazing.
They do. And then if you're not in Woodland Hills and you want to check out California Love, you can also find us at Green Angel, West Valley Patient Group, Strain Balboa. Those are the shops in the valley. You can also just in Weed Maps just type in California Love. We're a verified brand, so you can find us at any of your local retailers.
That's awesome.
Cool.
That's awesome.
Was that your first Haze Cup, or have you entered before?
It was the first that I entered as a participant.
Okay.
But I've been a friend of Hayes Radio and Andrew and Ty for a while. And they were actually one of the first events that I ever went to when I moved to LA.
Oh, wow.
They had like a Halloween crazy party.
I wish we were there for that one. We weren't there.
Yeah, we missed the one
we
last year.
keep hearing about it. Our first one was July for the Independence Cup.
Oh, thank you.
And we're looking forward to the holiday one.
The holiday one should be dope. I mean, it was the first party that I've ever been to where I saw live wrestling happening. I
Oh,
was like,
yeah,
wow,
same. That was wild.
Crazy.
That was really cool. Yeah, I've never seen anything like that either.
Were
It
you
was
at
really
the
fun.
Independence Cup?
I was, yeah.
Oh, yeah, we were there too.
That's
Yeah,
funny.
I've been at, I think all of them actually they've had since I moved here in October. So yeah.
I mean, it's a great way to meet people
Very
and
good.
like network, and everyone's like super friendly. It was like a really cool experience. But how did you get into cannabis, or like what made you want to pursue a career in this industry specifically?
Good question. Yeah, so I got into cannabis. I feel like everyone's path is a little bit different, not just to cannabis, to the career that they find themselves where they're like happiest. And I was working a software job. I actually, scaling back a little bit, I was living in San Francisco, and one of the communities that I was getting closest with was the spike ball community. I don't know if you guys are familiar with spike ball at all.
A little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
It's like a yellow ball, black net, played in groups of teams of two.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I know what you're
Like
talking about.
ESPN
Yeah, I see
has gone
people
on
like,
there.
playing the,
I've seen that.
So I met this guy. I won't name his name because he preferred to go nameless.
that's
But
fine.
he grew some fire weed. And to be honest, when I was living in San Francisco, I originally was buying dispensary weed, and then I would just buy from him because his prices were so much better. It was like $170 for an ounce.
Yeah, it just
and
makes
the
more
flower
sense.
was great. Like I was smoking like peach rings and like pineapple upside down cake.
You
and
knew you
different-
were getting
Yeah.
something good every
Yeah,
time.
exactly.
Yeah,
I
he
mean,
was like-
weed that he was smoking. So like
Yeah.
if he's growing it, smoking it, and then selling
you know
it.
it's
You know
gonna be
it's
good.
good. You can
Because like
trust
it's like
him.
what you said before. It's like you're trying to make like not so much a budget brand, but like something that can be affordable and is good. Because there's nothing worse than going to a dispensary, dropping like $100 on a
And they
product,
get like stems or seeds
and
and
then
shit.
you hate it or you don't like it or it wasn't what the bud tender told you it really was.
Yeah, that's the worst.
That's
That's
the
why
worst.
like I feel like having good bud tenders at your shop is key because they're really like the front
100%.
line, and they help push the product as well as like they help educate the customers and help kind of like turn biases upside down. Kind of like testing. I feel like testing is a big thing that we still need to change the way that people look at testing.
Oh, we do,
Right.
because like right now, like we've talked before on the shows, and I'm sure you know in like the Cali industry that high THC percentages that's what people look for in cells and dispensaries, but that's not so much the case of like what you could be using the entire plant for.
Exactly. Plus, it honestly it doesn't tell you anything. It's kind of like if you were to buy alcohol and based on the alcohol content percentage. Which
Right.
yeah, like in college we all did that.
Yeah.
But as you're an
Yeah.
adult, you're not like, oh, which tequila has the highest percentage.
You're more
tequila.
interested
Yeah.
in taste and quality and
Exactly, and that's
all
why
the
like
other factors.
one of the cool things about California Love actually on the branding, not specifically on the cruiser packs, but on all our A's, we show like the terpene percentage as well as like we list the key terpenes because to really understand what the smoke and what the high is going to provide for you,
Right.
you want to focus on terpenes that matter and terpenes that you like. That's why like I'm gonna probably butcher this name, but one of the terpenes that I tend to focus on is Limeone. I think that's how you pronounce it.
Yeah, you say
I know what you're talking
I'm
about.
not even gonna try either.
Yeah,
because
that's a rough one.
it helps to suppress hunger. So I feel like a common misconception is smoking makes you get the munchies, and I hate the
Yes.
munchies. I like to avoid the munchies at all cost. And so when I smoke flower, I don't get that, and especially if I'm smoking strains that have Limia on it. But going back to like how I got
Interesting.
started in
Yeah.
cannabis, so I was buying from my friend, and then I kind of went through like a whole. I got laid off, honestly, from my job. And I was kind of not sure on where to go. I was thinking New York. I took some mushrooms, decided New York was where I wanted to go. Moved to New York after having like, all right, this is where I need to be.
Yeah.
And New York was a city I had always wanted to live in. And then when I got to New York, my friend who I'd bought from in San Francisco, he was like, hey, like, you ever thought about selling? I was like, what do you mean? Like being a drug dealer? And he was like, yeah, but like, think of it this way: like you're buying a pound or a pack for anywhere from $1,200, more like $1,600, and which the equivalent for an ounce at $1,600 is basically like there's 16 ounces, so that means you're getting an ounce for $100,
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
which for any type of weed is a really good deal.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You're not
Definitely.
able to like even our like California Love, which is more of a budget brand, like they're eighths out the door, generally selling for $25 to $35. So if you were to times that by 8 before even getting to taxes, you're already like hitting like 200.
Yeah.
Oh
pretty
yeah,
close.
totally.
And so it's really like it's borderline. I mean, granted, that's a lot of weed. An ounce for most people is a lot of weed.
Yeah.
But he had fire weed, and I was like, all right, like no, that makes sense. And so I bought a few. I was working my software job at a company called Red Points. Miserable there. Mostly miserable because I think it just wasn't the right fit. Like I kind of took it because this is where, like, to me, chasing money never makes sense. I took it because I was like, oh, like, the pay is great. I was like, oh, like, the pay is great. That'll allow me to live in New York
so
and
many
do
people
the things
do
I want
that.
to do.
Yeah.
And it backfired. But I feel like you learn things better through failure and through, like, actually, like, being put in hard situations. And so that's where I was. Like, I didn't work out 3 months in, and I was selling weed, and I was like, what do I do now? Well, I'm living in New York. I have a $2,500 studio apartment that I'm paying for. Like, I have to be able to make ends meet. And so I started selling weed, and it was, like, my favorite job I've ever had in my life. And now I legally sell weed. And so this is actually my real favorite job that I've ever had because there's no risk involved. So.
Right. You don't have to,
That's
like,
awesome.
watch
That's
your
awesome.
back and all that.
Yeah. I mean, like, when I was in New York, like, I think I've been hustled out of, like, $4,500 a product. I've been jumped. I've had, like, pounds taken from me.
I can't imagine.
It's not the safest market to be in.
There's risks with everything.
There's risks with that,
you know?
Yeah, and that's what, like, when you're trapping, which is what it's called, or when you're, like, selling weed in the industry, like, that's common. Like, I feel like my experiences are not unique to, like, my negative experiences. It's just, it happens, and you either move out of the industry because of it, or you get hungrier and you just refocus and change how you're operating, and that's kind of what I did. And eventually I was living back home because it was the pandemic, living with my folks, and I wanted to work in cannabis, but I also wanted to move to LA. And so I was on LinkedIn, and I was just looking for jobs, and I found a company called Akerna. They were hiring for what's known as a sales development rep, which is essentially like or a business development rep. It's someone that typically software companies, it's an entry-level sales job where you're making anywhere from 30 to 150 calls, doing a lot of emails on a daily basis, and you're helping to generate business development opportunities for people that will eventually close business. And it allowed me to work remotely, which obviously during the pandemic was the only
ideal.
So that was really nice. And then it allowed me to save up enough money. I eventually moved to LA. I was living in LA, and through networking and through kind of putting myself out there, I was able to make connections that would eventually lead to an opportunity with California Love, which I'm very thankful for. And then even through that, I was able to get an opportunity with SF Canna. And to me, it's like the best of both worlds, because selling a product that's like premium as well as selling a product that everyone can be able to get access to.
And that you like, and that you're behind.
And that you can actually endorse and back and stuff like that. It's awesome. So I know a lot of listeners out there were probably our ears perked up when you said you went from the illicit market to then selling weed legally. So, and I'm sure they want to know how you did that. Like what do you think, like, what was the process? Or
so I think my background's a little bit different because I came from a white collar environment where my background was software sales and retail sales, and I didn't honestly start smoking cannabis until I moved to San Francisco when I was like 26, regularly smoking. I was the reason for that is, or I don't know why I didn't. I think it just never really, it was never the focus, or I don't know, honestly. But in San Francisco, I was working a software job, and I was going to Outside Lands Festival. And I was like, I feel like I need to get fucked up. Like, I need some drugs. And my buddy was like, oh, like, I can refer you. And this is during the Prop 215 or the medical era, where it was super easy to get weed. And not only that, but I was able to interview with a doctor on my phone through Ease and get weed delivered all within 30 minutes. So it took,
that's wild.
It was faster than your food through DoorDash took.
Oh, yeah, that's insane. Yeah, fucking
took forever.
Oh my God.
That's crazy. What events specifically, I guess, for networking that did you enjoy the most, or did you think were like the most beneficial to go to? So
in New York, I would say, and they still have some of these events, but like one of the cannabis communities that I was a part of was Happy Monkey.
I've heard of them.
Yeah, they're pretty big. They're going more mainstream, more on the rec market now.
Especially since it's legalized.
Yeah, they've partnered with the people like Steve D'Angelo and other folks like that, and really are one of the forefront brands in New York that's pushing the subject of cannabis forward. Awesome. And one of their founders, Vladimir, a great guy. And so I was involved with that community. They would have like weekly sort of pop-ups, kind of a trap house environment where you would go in, women would free, guys would pay $30. $30 would go towards a trap shop right next to it where you would buy, in quotes, I'm putting quotes in here, California weed. Who knows whether it was actually or not.
Wherever it was from, but back in the day when you were actually dealer, like, what kind of weed is this? You were lucky if you made up a name, and most of the time they just went, it's weed.
Exactly. So those were like one of the events that they'd have like music, comedy, dabbing, just like casual networking. And then the other community that I was part of in New York was called Spleef. They're still around. Spleef would host bi-weekly events, ticketed events, which I think is a little bit different because a lot of the events in California, specifically LA, are free events, not ticketed. And it's more like the payments on the vendor side and less on the consumer side unless you're buying cannabis on site through like a delivery or a retail partner. But these events were like $65 a ticket. You'd get infused beverages. There'd be infused food there. There would be like live music. Cool. There would be like an art installation. There'd be smoking room, and it would be at a restaurant or like a nightclub. But it would no alcohol, which to me is like one of the keys. I feel like is when you're hosting a party and there's alcohol involved, chances are something happens negatively.
Yeah.
Of course.
I agree.
And when you're not involving that at all, the likelihood that anything pops off negatively is very slim to none. Like I think High Rise, which is one of it used to be a high rise mansion in LA where they would host these massive cannabis events at their mansion. And I think they had a quote that like they hosted over 250 parties in like a 3 or 5 year span. I'm going to definitely butcher that and it's probably inaccurate, but numbers are slightly close to there. And they said that they had like no fights ever.
Wow.
Which
that's
is
crazy.
wild.
That should be telling though to people who have, who you think one is better than the other or whatever, but that alone should be telling that the like destructive behaviors that are associated with drinking alcohol, and just being able to have an environment that's safe for people to come and network and hang out with people and not have to worry,
Absolutely. And I think there are definitely parties that have alcohol that don't have issues.
Yeah. I mean, that's just everything.
Totally.
One of the things you have to worry about when you're including alcohol, whereas if it's just cannabis, there's just less worries because at the end of the day, if someone gets too high, too stoned, they're probably just going to fall asleep on the couch.
Yeah, you always say that. It's like you either get the munchies and eat too much or just fall asleep. Like there's really nothing to worry about there.
Yeah. So like in LA, you asked about like events that I'm going to or things. So every Thursday, actually, Doja Pack, which is one of the brands, hosts a weekly Thursday event that you can find through his Telegram. That's at 6685 Hollywood Boulevard.
Okay, that's awesome.
And
check that out.
It's like a who's who of people in the industry. It's a fire event, and it's allowed me to really like continue to network with people that are significant players in the industry that I wouldn't necessarily have access to. And that's why, like, to me, one of the words that I use for that is called propiquity.
Okay.
I don't know if you guys are familiar with that.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. And also remember that we're the audience we have here.
Yeah, so. I don't think the audience would know either. So
propiquity is essentially it's having access to. It's like the difference between remote work versus working in an office. When you're working in an office, you have access to your CEO, you have access to your CFO, you have access to C-level executives that you wouldn't normally have access to. So if you want to propose lunch to them and then understand, you can ask them any questions through lunch. And that's like invaluable time. And so propiquity for me is at these events having access to people that are running multi-million-dollar brands that I wouldn't normally have access to in a comfortable, casual environment where they're able to share game or share tips on what's made them successful or kind of what their outlook on it is. And then you can kind of add to that. And to me, that's like invaluable and something that I definitely seek out. And I think you find that a lot of times at cannabis events, not just at Doja Pack. There's events like Green Street hosts awesome events on an almost weekly basis where there's just Green Street, by the way, is a cannabis co-working space.
Yeah, I was going to say, what is Green Street for those that don't know?
So it's 718 South Hill Street in, I think that's downtown LA. It's a fully cannabis-friendly co-working space where they rent office space for different brands. Like Originals is there, as well as like a who's who of different brands in LA. And the office spaces aren't terribly expensive, and you have access to being able to not just smoke weed in the building, but also you're surrounded by other people and other brands, so you kind of get that propiquity that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, definitely. Nice. That's awesome. I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah. There's actually a couple of them. Another cannabis co-working space is called Infused Social House, which is 4312 West Jefferson Boulevard. They actually hosted an afters event this past Sunday, and they're pretty regularly hosting different cannabis-friendly events, as well as like house music and DJ events. And
that's cool.
It's a pretty dope spot, and just bringing different people together that you wouldn't necessarily put in the same room. So.
Right. Yeah.
That's awesome. Because definitely, like, since like I'm an investor in the space and all that, when I first started out, it's hard to pick and choose. If you don't really know too many people, which events are actually worth your time and money going to. Because there's a lot of just bullshit out there that they're just looking for your money, and it's
that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, and to me, that's kind of like the more interesting thing is that at least in LA, most of the events I go to are free. I mean, parking sometimes costs money, but like the events themselves, it's really just like all you have to do is RSVP. Like Hazy, for example, Hazy LA, they're a cannabis studio out in downtown LA and cannabis creative agency, and they host different events at their studio, and that's a cannabis-free or friendly environment. And so like they hosted a Halloween party there this past Saturday. And like there's different things that unless you're aware of these brands or unless you're seeking them out, you're not necessarily like understanding where to go, which is hard because I feel like cannabis also is hard to advertise. And so I feel like that's probably a big reason why people are less familiar with it. But there's even like the Montalban. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that.
No, if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah,
that
so
would be cool.
the Montalban is a rooftop theater.
Okay.
And I forget the address for that, but that's downtown LA as well. Yeah. And they actually hosted the Emerald Cup there this past, like their award ceremony
that's nice.
Past, like whenever that was. And then this past Wednesday, actually, Fideli. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Fideli or Gas No Breaks or Fiore. Fidel's, which he's famous for his hash holes. So a hash hole is essentially like ground flour with a donut of concentrate in the middle, and it kind of burns unique where when it burns, you see like this donut hole.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
That's really
it's pretty
cool.
dope.
That's interesting.
And it's super stony, and he aired the first episode of his docuseries at the Montalban, and they had like a dab bar, and they were making hash holes there, and then they had like a burrito stand, and they had a bar, and they had like this cookie vendor, Laid Cookies, Leid, which are actually great guys, great cookies. They're at like all the cannabis events, and then like. So that's really cool. And they host a weekly movie night. So every Sunday,
that's very nice.
Fun.
You can go there. And tickets are, I think, around like $20, not terribly expensive. And it's a
bad.
rooftop theater. And from, I want to say like 6 to 10 or 6 to 11, you can chill, smoke, bring your own bud, bring your own, maybe no alcohol. I think probably you can only buy alcohol on site.
Probably.
But they usually also have like a delivery partner where you're able to buy cannabis from. They always have a dab bar, and it probably fits, I'd say, like 250 to 350 people there.
Oh, it's decently sized.
Yeah, so like future date night spot for you guys.
There you go, definitely. How did you find out about all these events here when you moved out here? I mean, just like talking to people, word of mouth type thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good question as well. I don't exactly remember how I first found out about them. I think part of it was just, I found out about Hazy LA and High Rise before moving to LA.
Okay.
I was familiar with them, and I always saw like these mansion parties. And then I was sort of familiar with Secret Sesh, which is another cannabis event that they host almost on a monthly basis. They actually hosted one at Irving Plaza in New York.
Yeah, they just did one recently in New York.
Yeah, and dope group guys. Tim is one of the founders there, and then and they do an awesome job with events. They host their Secret Sessions typically at the Wisdom, which is a kind of like immersive experience. Really cool place to just trip out on.
That's cool.
Yeah, and they host like different vendors, and there's food trucks, and it's a really cool scene. And I think those tickets are usually like $15 to $20. But just like how I found out about it, I guess probably Instagram some way.
Yeah, social media is just like the way to find things out nowadays.
Yeah, I may have even honestly, like I got on Clubhouse 2 Januaries ago, and that's how I got connected with a number of the cannabis people that live out here and work out here. And I was in Massachusetts trying to grow my network, not working really in the industry at all, and just trying to find a way to get into the industry. And I mean, unfortunately, Clubhouse, while it's still a thing, is definitely not used the same way now that it was back then. It was kind of like this moment that they had.
Which is awesome, that like right place, right time.
Yeah, exactly.
Right
which is
kind of thing.
I feel like, and that kind of goes to like just being intentional with like your time, intentional with what you want. Like if you're intentional with the direction that you're taking your life, you're intentional with what you're looking for, then you're more likely to find what you're looking for.
Definitely.
That's why I say like the use of cannabis. If you want to use it like you want to use it in the wrong way, you will.
You will, right.
And if you want to use it in the right way, you will.
Exactly.
Like with anything.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what you're specifically doing at Cali Love right now?
Sure.
Just a little about your position.
Yeah, so at California Love, I handle SoCal sales from the Valley all the way down to the OC. And what that means is I manage about 30 shops or 25 shops that we're in. And by manage, I mean I'm checking in on them. I'm dropping by and dropping food off. I'm figuring out different ways to run different promos with different shops and just how I can best support the brand as well as best support the store, and as well as seeking out new accounts. But it's also like right now I feel like there's this thing happening throughout the U.S. and I feel like we're kind of in like a recession, in my opinion.
I mean, you just said that recently.
Yeah,
you
like
just said
spending's at an all-time low, and prices are at an all-time high, except for cannabis prices. Cannabis prices have not increased really probably in the past 6 years from like buying a standpoint. It's the prices have increased for cultivations, they've increased for manufacturers, they've increased for distributions, but retailers haven't necessarily changed their price, so their margins have changed. And the average consumer, I think, doesn't necessarily understand that. And so what you're seeing right now is because demand is just down across the board, people have less money to spend, as shops are struggling. And there's a lot of shops that in 6 months won't exist. In 12 months, I feel like probably in 6 to 12 months, over 50% of the brands that are out there won't exist. Because
I mean, that's like just going to the dispensary one time and then coming back and then that brand's like not there and you're like, what happened?
That brand's not there anymore or something like that. Because like even now, like especially like I've been hearing a lot that the growers have been getting hit because they just can't sell what they used to be able to sell for.
Yeah, I mean it's wild. Like I mean you can find like sun-grown flower for like $50 a pound. Which is wild. I mean, you can like prices that are an all-time low, and you can
has an ashtray over there.
Oh yeah.
And it's just, I think it's hard, but it's also, to me, this is where like the cream of the crop rises. Where if you have a good product, if you have a good brand, and if you're doing everything you can to put that brand in the right retailer partners, because it's not about the amount of retail partners, it's about finding the
quality
key accounts where the product's moving, you're working with the right buyers, you're working with the right retail team. And I feel like we've done that at California Love. We've continued to identify the right retail partners to help push different products with, which is key because if you attach your horse to the wrong ones, then you can kind of be chasing accounts where like there's, I'm not going to name any retailer specifically. There are retailers out there that owe us like between $10,000 to $14,000, and
that's crazy.
That's wild.
To be honest,
that's
like
not right.
That's actually, you're 100% right that it's not right, but that's like small. Like I have other friends that are owed like $40,000 to $100,000 by different retailers, and sometimes it's because retailers, the product moves slow, and that's just a byproduct of that. And then other times it's because they have shady business practices where like the flower is selling, and then kind of like a Ponzi scheme, rather than paying that brand back or rebuying, then they're using that money for someone else.
Yeah, they'll go buy more product and be like,
or they'll just like line their pockets
back
with
next round or some shit like that. Like it's that's not right.
And I think it's hard about that because obviously like part of the reason that doesn't exist necessarily from a retailer standpoint for other industries is because it's more regulated or maybe it's less regulated, I guess. Like alcohol doesn't really, I don't hear about like alcohol brands like going under because their product's not moving.
Yeah, you don't hear about those stories.
It's crazy. I mean, like it's funny that you bring that up because when we were in Montana, they have a weird like a beer law for like their brews and stuff like that they can only serve you 48 ounces
a
day per customer. That's only like 3. That's like 3 pint. That's like 3 pint glasses. That's it.
I was like, what? Yeah, and then they said the reasoning for it was because they thought when the breweries opened that the bars would lose business. And I'm like, but wouldn't you go to a bar for liquor? I mean, that's my first thought. Just weird.
That's odd. I feel like that's like not totally dissimilar to like Utah, where like I think Utah, the alcohol percentages are lower across the board for all brands.
I've heard
and then
that.
Also like most bars, for every drink you also have to order like an appetizer or like a food thing.
Interesting.
Like you have to eat.
Yeah, which
they did that during COVID at a lot of places too. Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Personally, I barely ever drink. I mostly just smoke a lot of weed. Partially because I mean, I used to drink more and I used to smoke less, and then I just found that like when I drink, I not that I lose control, but it's harder to stay focused and harder to like just vision like fogs.
Which is funny though, because some people will still think like, oh, like how are you productive and smoke weed, and I think that's wild that people think like that.
Oh, I mean, definitely. That's one of the reasons we do this podcast, is to show that you can smoke, you can still do business, have a conversation, and still do everything out there. Because even for me, it was a little weird when I started going to like the cannabis, like MJ BizCon and like the investor summits and stuff like that for cannabis and psychedelics, that all these guys just like standing outside, smoking, not caring, and going inside and conducting the same amount of business that you would in a office building somewhere where everyone doesn't smoke or whatnot.
Yeah, it's just about breaking that stigma. I don't think I asked, like, with your parents, like, I know you lived there and you were, like, trapping and stuff. Like, did they ever have, like, a negative, like, not attach a negative connotation with weed, or were they, like,
and, like, what turned you on to cannabis?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, my parents don't know that I trapped at all.
Oh.
They probably
I was just curious.
I mean, I was just more honest than I think I have been in a public setting. But my parents are both like pretty progressive, liberal people. Yeah. My dad actually is a criminal defense attorney, and my mom's a psychotherapist.
Wow.
And also a medium as well.
Oh, that's interesting.
So very intuitive people.
Yeah.
And I've smoked weed with both of them as an adult, to give you some idea. Also, like when I was looking for work on LinkedIn, and my mom was like, once you get a job in cannabis, like I'll smoke a joint with you. And I was like, fuck, like I want a job just so I can smoke with you, not even so I got a job. Like that just sounds great.
Yeah. That's pretty funny. I mean, I guess like everyone, really funny, you never know, like some people come from backgrounds where it was widely accepted, but others like not so much. So it's like interesting to see, especially someone who chooses to go into the industry, like where that initial idea or like passion came from, you know?
Yeah, I mean, my sister probably won't listen to this. So my sister was like a big time stoner in high school. I barely smoked. She was way more of the partier. I was just in my own like bubble, sort of, just like naive to things, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it just was a thing. And then my parents, I'd say both of them were pretty open about like their drug use in college. My dad went to the hippiest school in the country. He went to a school called Hampshire College.
Okay.
You probably never heard
I've
of
never
it.
even heard of it.
I've never heard of that. Where is it?
It's a liberal arts school in right by Northampton. It's in Hadley, Massachusetts. If it's still around, like if you've ever heard of the producer Ken Burns.
Yeah.
So he went to Hampshire. He's the most famous alum.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, but Hampshire's like unique in the sense that my tutor for I'm Jewish, and my bar mitzvah, he went to Yale, and he had a saying that I chickened out of going to Hampshire and decided to go to Yale. And he says this because at Hampshire, you take classes for your first 2 years, just like any other college student. And then after that point, you have to design your major. You have to create like a project that for the next 2-3 years, you're doing research on, that eventually you'll present to a board of not just your peers, but also a board of professors.
Wow.
And so
holy crap.
I personally could not have handled that lack of structure.
Hell no.
And
I need structure.
So it's not for everyone.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
But they're also like super hippie in the sense that like they're known as a school that like traditionally just very like go with the flow. Like you'll find a lot of acid, tabs, mushrooms there. Also, like it's right next to UMass Amherst, which used to be called ZooMass and was one of the top party schools in the country when I was in high school.
Yeah, I've heard
and
that.
then they like cracked down. They used to like, it was wild. People used to flip cars after hockey
That's
game off.
insane.
Holy shit.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, you definitely can't get away with the stuff like that now.
That's wild.
Alcohol.
Nowadays, alcohol, definitely fueled by alcohol.
Yeah.
That's too funny.
Crazy.
If you had to pick your favorite strain, I'm just curious, what would you pick?
Favorite strain. I mean, I would say the one that made me like the most giddy, and this is gonna come off as a little bit of bias, but it's honestly the Zerbert strain for SF Canna. It's just like super smooth. It's got like that, like just that candy taste. Burns clean. Also, like to me, I'm smoking mostly top shelf flower, and so to me, one of the key things is how much am I coughing? Like we just smoked a joint. I didn't really cough at all during that.
Yeah, either did I.
I didn't either.
And like I don't want to cough. If I'm coughing at all, that means it's too harsh. That means, to be honest, usually if I smoke a joint and I cough one or two, then I put it down and I stop smoking it. That hasn't always been the case, but it's definitely as I've started to become in different circles and just get better products and just more top shelf flower, you notice
the characteristics, what what makes this cannabis better from this cannabis and stuff.
Exactly. And so I don't know enough about like what goes into that. I think part of it has to do with the flush, and I also don't. If you ask me like what does flush mean, I don't know what that means. But I think that has a little bit to do with how clean the smoke is.
Yeah, I feel like I have a big feeling it has to do with like the curing and the drying process and all that stuff. Because like I feel like if that's because even with like tobacco and cigars, since my dad's a big cigar smoker and stuff, like keeping that in the right humidity and all that stuff is a very important thing to the flavor and taste.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the other thing. I feel like I used to leave weed in my car all the time.
Oh yeah, who didn't?
Yeah, but and now I've realized that if I leave weed in my car, it dries the fuck out. Yeah, so I just leave it at my house, and I bring what I need and I grind it up in my car and smoke in my car. But like, I'm not really leaving weed in my car because it's too hot here. Like you get to the valley, it's usually like anywhere from 85. I mean, we're in the valley right now, so like 85 to 95 most days.
Yeah. When it's not in the right container, humidity can get to it, and air and stuff like that can degrade it and stuff like that. I've actually seen really interesting things. I want to get one. They're called cannadors. They're like humidors for cannabis instead of cigars.
Huh.
So you can store your cannabis in like a locked box if you have kids at home or want to keep it safe. And you can put like Bovetta humidity packs and stuff like that in there to keep it at the right humidity so you don't get like terpene degradation or like your bud getting too dry or too moist or anything like that. Again, it stores it for like the longest period of time.
That makes sense. So I've actually heard mixed things about Bovetta.
Oh, yeah.
In terms of like, I used to use them all the time, and then some people say like if you store it with that, then it changes like the taste and the terpene profile a little bit. Of the weed that you're storing.
Yeah, there's all different kinds of
but generally speaking, I think if you're able to like, I mean, it sounds
more. I feel like it's more about getting that right climate and balance in there, no matter how you do it.
Under 70 degrees, no humidity. Yeah, living on the West Coast. There you go.
Yeah.
How long have you been out here in LA?
So I've been in LA a little. So I moved to LA last end of September.
Oh, okay. So pretty recent.
Yeah, the first event I was at, I was like in LA 2 days, and then I flew to Santa Rosa for Hall of Flowers. And then I flew back and I moved into a spot that ended up not working out 2 days later. So.
Yeah, we were gonna go to Hall of Flowers, but we've never made it out there.
Yeah, we never made it out there.
We're planning on BizCon next month though.
Okay. Yeah, I'll be at BizCon.
Oh,
okay, cool.
Yeah, the after parties. I'll be working during the day and then going to the after parties because the after parties, to be honest, are I feel like really where you network and get connections more so than during the actual event.
It's more casual.
Oh
too.
no, yeah, totally. Like at the that's where I met Andrew, and everybody was at like an after party event, and I think I make more connections there than I do actually walking around the floor, and I will actually more like usable connections.
Yeah, because like if you're at a conference, generally they're trying to sell you something.
So, right.
Which especially
makes sense. Like
when you're an investor,
thousands of dollars.
Especially in my spot when you're investors. First, when you say that, and right away they're like, they're your best friend right away. They're like, hey,
switches,
buddy.
You know. That's why doing this too, like being on the podcast too. It's like you don't really know who you're talking to, and I think that's like kind of the cool thing about it. But in that like casual setting, you really get to know them, like you're smoking, hanging out, and
and that's honestly why I go to events. Yeah, I mean, I like events because like you can smoke great cannabis. Most events you're getting free weed anyways, which is the other thing that people don't always realize. When you work in the industry, sometimes you make less. But what you also do is you get tons of free weed.
Tons of product.
Yeah, but that's value in itself.
100%.
You know? So
cannabis
it's getting paid just in a different
just like
way.
Money.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's green.
And I think eventually people will make money similar to other industries. It just has to, it'll take time.
Yeah, just more growth and like evolution.
It's like I'll do this for you, but instead of compensating you in cash, I can compensate you in cannabis and flower or whatever.
What you were just smoking, were those the pre-rolls?
No, this was just like something I ground out.
I wasn't sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
not even
good.
this, honestly. It's just, I couldn't tell you what it was.
Yeah, we were talking about like flower and stuff like that. I always like to ask indoor or outdoor.
Yeah, I mean, so
what's your personal favorite?
Well, so my friend that I was buying from in San Francisco, that was Hoop House or light assisted, where you're kind of in like this greenhouse makeshift thing, and then you're scaling it back and opening. The sunlight is pouring in, and that's to me when and I feel like Preferred Gardens is one of the most well-known names for greenhouse. And Dave, who's the grower and founder of Preferred Gardens, he always says outdoor, or he'll say like sunlight assisted, where because you're really getting more terpenes than you are if it's indoor.
Having
said that, I
better
smoke
total cannabinoid profile.
Yeah, having said that, I don't smoke outdoor. I only smoke indoor because all the brands. I mean, most of the brands.
Most of the brands out there are
indoor.
Indoor grown. The first thing I do when I walk into a dispensary, like, oh, what are you looking for? That I'm like, having indoor, good outdoor grown brands and stuff like that, and 75% of the time they stare at me and they go,
it's like slim to
let me check the back. We may have one or two. I go, all right.
Yeah,
I'm like, I'll look at them and And usually like they're pretty good because I just like that better terpene profile, and because that's why I say like I don't like where the market's going with all the
like the high THC
counts and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I mean, like it's what people want, but it's.
I mean, as we just saw with like the Jeter
it's not the most
like
important thing.
The THC doesn't really show anything. It's just like it's a rat race. I mean, like if you think about it from a lab standpoint, labs are testing the product, but who is their customer? Their customer is the brands that are working with them.
Yeah.
So if you want to think logically, they're going to want to do everything they can to maintain that relationship. And there's a lot of different testing labs out there. So if you send your product to one lab and it tests at like below what you want it to, you could tell them to basically F off and like not work with them, and then choose a different lab and then get a totally different result because they're gonna. And that's kind of I feel like we're kind of at like a rock and a hard place because it's like it goes back to me about like just re-educating the customer and how like THC percentage doesn't tell you anything. It tells you. It doesn't even tell you that you're gonna get high because
and people don't even know
something that has
I've smoked the highest THC percentages that I've seen in stores, and you smoke it, you get high for like 2 minutes, and then you kind of just like fade out real quick, and you're like, what's the point of this? And you're pissed off because you just spent more money because it's a high THC percentage because you pay for the percentage, not like the actual like weight of the flower in the stores.
Yeah.
Especially in like states like Colorado and stuff like that, because you can mix and match, and then it depends on your total THC count, I think, at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think in Massachusetts they do like TAC, like total something cannabinoid effect or something. And you see more and more like not just the THC but the total percentage, and then also like the CBD percentage and the terpene percentage. I would say like if you wanted to focus on one percentage, focus on terpene percentage, because that's going to show you. And also like don't really focus on it. Spend like 5 seconds focusing on it and then focusing more on like the terpenes. Or I mean, and this is harder because like there are so many brands out there. So from a consumer standpoint, it's really whatever the bud tender is telling them.
Yeah,
definitely. So
before we close out, do you have any shout outs?
Shout out to California Love. Shout out to SF Canna.
Check them out.
Shout out to the nameless friend that I cannot name for helping me get involved. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, we'll see you next time.
Definitely. See you guys next time.
You're listening to Hayes Radio Network, Cannabis Lifestyle Radio.